Before we start, I think we need to make a distinction between monk mode and MGTOW. So let's be clear what monk mode is. Monk mode is basically just avoiding all women for a set period of time so you can get yourself in order. And people have been doing this since year dot. I've done it. I recently did it for about 8 or 9 months after I lost my job, just to get my head back into a good position and to work on some vices that I've got. And I've succeeded in that, and that's done me a great good. And I'd recommend that at times of difficulty men do that. I think that's an incredibly beneficial thing to do if you're disposed to do it. However, the MGTOW we'll be talking about is not that. When we refer to MGTOW, we're referring specifically to this new movement that's come about over the last 10 to 15 years. That is essentially a lot of men who are disgruntled with the way the society treats women and how women treat them. And it sort of results in a kind of, not necessarily hatred, but a quasi-dislike for women. This kind of disdain that they have for women, and often understandably so, because women have been unpleasant to them. And they don't quite know how to address it, so they blame society, understandably, as a result of laws and things like that which protect this kind of behaviour. The two definitions I'll principally be talking about will be gynocracy, which is essentially ruled by women, which they perceive to be where our society is at, and hypergamy, which is women essentially trading up and dating and marrying men that are, for all intents and purposes, of a higher station than they are, in terms of what is known as SMV, or sexual marketplace value, which means essentially the value that a particular person has to a mate of the opposite sex. Now, I've never really understood the problem that people have with hypergamy. It does strike me as kind of cope, in that these men can't get with these women, and these women end up getting with, well, what they would call Chad. But, just higher sexual marketplace value men than them. And to people who have a problem with that, I'd just suggest that they increase their value. It's not that difficult. With men, we are blessed in that we are found attractive based on our ability to lift heavy things and our personalities, whereas women aren't quite so lucky. So all we need to do in that case is to work on ourselves and have the humility to suggest that we are in fact very, very imperfect, and we should seek our own perfection. That's what a lot of this channel is about. However, gynocracy is another thing entirely. The most successful societies to exist are those that are run by men with a very, very strong law. The Romans, the Greeks, the Jews, and Christian kingdoms that inherited from these traditions of antiquity are probably the best examples of this. In fact, it is very, very out of the ordinary for a society to be ran by women. And today we find ourselves in a position where this is becoming increasingly the case. Now, I suspect that the reason why a lot of this legislation went through, things that enable women in the workplace, is not only to reduce the wages that have to be paid because you've just doubled the workforce, but also so certain men can take advantage of having so many women working for them. Because as we know, men in a position of authority are in a position, if they're smart enough, to take massive advantage over these women, for obvious ends. Now, I actually said in a recent video, on the Patreon itself, that the effeminacy of men is often indicated by the level of feminism in a society, and this is one of the aspects of that. So, effeminacy is essentially a man's ability to be controlled by his lower passions, so sex, food, and this ultimately comes out of a weakening of the family, because families require a level of self-control in order to be run. So men have become effeminate and weak, and not only have they permitted these sorts of women into the workforce by virtue of this weakness, but you also have tons and tons of kids abandoned to less than stellar mothers by men who do not care, or they have a cuckolded father who is taken advantage of by a belligerent woman, who, according to King Solomon, ought never to be married. So what's the result of this? You've got a new generation of men raised by women who are often very weak on moral instruction and have come together with a man for the most frivolous of reasons, who have no idea of how to raise a child. They think it will just do it itself. And they'll often even bully the child because they are morally disordered and are unaware of the natural law that they ought to follow. So you have this. And so you've got loads of men coming out with a malformed understanding of the world, as well as with the conception that their mother abused them, which is often the case. Then you end up with them entering the workplace with a load of female managers with the same problems, and with the added benefit of there being an incompatible mindset there. Often a lot of female bosses are awful. You can only read online all of the stories of horrific female bosses. I operated under one as well, and although she was ostensibly nice, she was one heck of a hard ass beyond all reason. On the other hand, I'm also incredibly lucky in that I love my mum to pieces, and although she of course has her stumblings, she's done the very best for me and my brother, and I don't think I'd be where I am today without her. So this isn't to say that all women in the modern world are disordered. This is to say that there is a pervading trend of that kind of disorder that needs to be dealt with. And I think that MGTOW are acting out against that in a way that lacks understanding of the real world. So they get depressed, they don't have a systematized understanding of the world, and so they just end up in this almost bizarre political movement to try and change something they don't understand the nature of, or don't even have a theory to understand what caused it, that isn't incredibly filled with errors. Like, for example, the fact that a woman can never love you is ostensibly false. Maybe not in the way that you conceive of love, but women definitely can. They're not all these backstabbing, horrific human beings. Although they are everywhere now, these sorts of women. So now I think we've adequately diagnosed the problem with MGTOW. How do we go about solving this? We educate them in systematizing the world in a way that is fundamentally reasoned. We give them natural law, we give them Aristotle, we give them Aquinas, because not only will that give them meaning to their lives, that meaning that they so desperately desire, it will give them a way to view the world which is fundamentally within reality. Because the way that these people operate now, they have a semblance of reality, like many people, but there are a lot of errors which lead them into unhappiness, which I pray that by virtue of this channel, I can assist them in finding. For even though I speak in high-minded words, I of course don't know it all myself. All I hope to do is to hand out to those who listen the places to find this knowledge and to give a brief rundown of these sorts of things. When they learn this, they learn the ways their ancestors operated, they will become great men. Thanks for watching. A very big thank you to those on the list here. These are subscribers to the Renaissance Man program who get audiobooks and controversial videos every week for $5 a month. There's already quite a lot of content there, so if you check it out in the description, you won't be missing out. Thank you.